for having us. We're really excited to participate in the Urban Tech Connects 2021 conference and plugged in South LA. It certainly is a important aspect of the evolution of the community and the development of the community. I've got Mayor Michael Tubbs, former mayor of Stockton, who probably needs no introduction. And we thought we would just have a conversation as a entrepreneur on our side and a former mayor on his side about how young entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, can really set themselves up for success in today's economy and the future economy. With that, many of you know Michael Tubbs. He has been mayor of Stockton, was on many lists, including the Forbes 30 Under 30, really joined Stockton and converted a deficit into a surplus, has done a number of really empowering things around economic development, and really has led the country on several important initiatives, including guaranteed basic income, and really was one of the youngest mayors, in fact, the youngest mayor of a major city and the first African-American elected to that position. So Mayor Tubbs, glad to have you, and let's take it away.
I'm super excited. And before we start, let me just introduce Martin. Martin, what I appreciate about Martin, I think what's instructive, and you'll see in this conversation, is the fact that he was doing the work before it was cool, before it had a name, before it had a brand. For over the past decade, he's been investing in South LA. He's the CEO of SoLa Impact, the seventh largest, fastest growing, minority-owned business in this country. Won Opportunity Zone Fund of the Year last year. It is really pushing us to think about sort of how do you make sure capitalism works, and how do we make sure that people of color, Black communities see development done in a way that isn't disruptive or doesn't displace. And I've been honored over the past several months to be working closely with him and his team, particularly on the Black Impact Community Fund, which we'll talk about later. So Martin, I guess let's start with, you're not old, but you may be a little bit older than many of the people watching us. So what, from this last $1 billion raise you're doing, is there like one or two quick lessons about sort of taking your vision for equitable development to reality, and how were you able to begin to raise funds for that?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think that, if there are any lessons, I remind myself there are no shortcuts, right? It takes a decade to be an overnight success. And while SoLa has recently gotten a fair amount of attention for some of the work that we're doing and the fund, the Black Impact Fund that we're raising, it really has taken a decade of building a track record, brick by brick and block by block to enable that to happen. I think the second thing, and really it's been one of the most gratifying pieces of leading SoLa, has been that you have to be true to yourself, and you have to find a avenue and a vehicle and a platform that really represents the values that you espouse and that benefits the communities that you care about. And one of the things I always say is I want it to be in areas where I'm celebrated, not where I'm tolerated. And having spent a lot of time in private equity, having been at General Atlantic Partners early in my career, which was a great platform to learn about bold thinking and bold ideas, and really the catalytic capabilities of technology, but ultimately found myself as a real estate investor investing in communities of color and finding ways to really ensure that not only do we deliver very good returns to our investors, but that fundamentally we were delivering very good returns to our tenants and the communities that we invest in. And along the way, I've met incredible partners, investors, friends of the fund, and Michael Tubbs himself. I think we got to know each other a little over a year ago through some of the work that you were doing in Stockton and in opportunity zones and trying to attract private capital to Stockton. And then really felt there was for many years, I sort of went, look, we don't do anything in politics. We're very ill-informed, but really met what I consider to be a very forward-thinking, for lack of a better term, a politician, but really a community, engager and someone with a heart for their community in Michael Tubbs. And as he, may have been for him bad news that he wasn't reelected, for me was great news, because I sort of said, listen, come over to the private side, see how it's done, and was able to get him to come over and spend a lot of time with us on the Black Impact Community Fund. But Michael, tell me about sort of what inspired your journey and got you over to the private side, at least for the time being.
No, I, as you know, like you all, I am obsessed with this notion of opportunity, and I've been so thankful to have had just amazing opportunities and just figuring out ways that we extend opportunity to everyone. Because you can't control equality of outcomes, but you should at least have equal inputs, or as close to equal inputs as possible, and then let the chips fall where they may. So after spending 8 long years in local government, including 4 as mayor, I spent a lot of my time talking to folks like you and trying to get folks like you to invest in Stockton. I joke all the time that if I had had a SoLa Impact development partner in Stockton, maybe the election would have ended up a little bit differently. Maybe not, because those lies were vicious, but maybe there would have been another sort of achievement in the hat. And I was really inspired by the vision, because to set the context, it was 2020, like November, December. And it was a couple months after the George Floyd sort of uprising and protests. And I was really thinking about how that moment was so much bigger than just police brutality and police violence, which is important. But really, I felt folks were protesting this lack of opportunity, the violence of poverty, structural violence, if you will. And I was thinking about, okay, in my next chapter, I want to do some stuff with government still and advise the government, like do some of that stuff, policy stuff, but also really begin to think about sort of how does understand the market, understand the private side, because government can't solve everything. Government's not designed to solve every problem, right? And the market can't solve everything either. There's an interplay between the two. So, and then hearing about the vision of the Black Impact Fund and the way it was a first group raising a lot of money that had explicit racial justice agenda, but I knew in talking with you, Martin, that it wasn't performative, that it was actually real, that you actually believe these things. And I was also like, well, how the hell is he raising money talking like this? and I'm still trying to figure out that piece. But that's really what really attracted me, was this chance to sort of continue the work of creating opportunity, but from a different lens and from a different lane, and to kind of learn new language, new skills, and a new way of getting things done, but all geared towards the same destination. But I think my next question was in my answer. How have you been able to be, you mentioned this in your first answer actually, how have you been able to be true to yourself while raising money? Like, you're raising $1 billion for a fund that's explicitly about Black and brown people. But that seems very hard.
Well, it's always a challenge in some respects, and the other respects it isn't, because it is, if you do things that are in your purpose and in your values, it comes easily, at least in terms of the investment in time and the passion and building a team around that. And it's not possible without an incredible team. And we've, we had raised over $200 million to date. And now we're on our 4th fund, but it didn't come, it didn't come easily. It didn't come overnight. And I think one of the things that I learned in the way that you frame things is really the path from rhetoric to results is through record, right? And I think that, having the opportunity, I mean, I started investing in South LA over a decade ago. I started using my own money, bought many buildings, and then started our first fund in 2014 and our second fund in 2017 and our third fund in 2019, and each of those times really had to have laser focus on operations and value and delivering true social impact in the communities that we have invested in. And now we're facing the opportunity to take that much more across California and into the Pacific Northwest. with a much bigger platform. I would say, similar to what you shared, over the last year, there's been a tremendous amount of talk and focus on diversity and inclusion, on racial justice, on racial equity. And certainly there have been a lot of firms that have made huge announcements about what they intend to do in this area. And I think that you would probably agree that we all hope that this would not be just a moment, but a movement, right? And it's incumbent on all of us as consumers, as stakeholders, as leaders, to hold, the institutional world accountable to ensuring that those that capital, that intention translates into investments into Black and Brown led venture firms, Black and Brown platforms, most importantly in our case, Black and Brown communities, meaning that it ultimately gets to the people that matter, women-led businesses, women-led platforms. It's really about empowering groups that had historically not been given the platform. And one of the things that we accept the hard way is, look, the golden rule is, unfortunately, those with the gold make the rules. And so we work very hard to ensure that really mission-aligned institutional investors, corporations have a vehicle through which they can meet their fiduciary responsibilities of investing with integrity and with good results, but also meet a broader social mandate of really putting capital to work where it's desperately needed. And I know that, ironically, what I learned from you is, look, even as a mayor and as a politician, you've had to go out and raise capital. You've had to go out and convince, business-minded people that are in it for, for various reasons, how to, to do that in Stockton. And would love to hear about one or two of your anecdotes in that journey as well.
Yeah, I think for me, first I had to get over the numbers, right? Because I grew up very poor. So when we just raised money for things, people would just throw out these numbers, 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures. It's just like, it just felt very intimidating. So first I had to get out of my own head and realize that it wasn't for me. It was for this purpose or this mission or this thing I care about, this place I care about. And then I realized, much like you mentioned, that all of it was relational. All of it was sort of having a track record and being that people are always watching. People are watching how you act in meetings. People are watching how you interact on social media. People are watching and forming judgments and et cetera. Not judgments being not pejorative, but just a judgment, an assessment of you. And I just realized I just made really good, deep relationships with people at a human level and brought them along with the journey. So when I needed to ask them for something, the answer was the art of war. Sun Tzu always talks about you need to win before you fight, you have to make sure that you don't fight if you don't know you're going to win. And I would approach fundraising the same way, that I would go to people that I just felt a high likelihood would say yes, or would have a very hard time saying no. And if they said no, there was like a legitimate reason, and they would say yes the next time. So I think part of it is being very intentional, not in a Machiavellian way, but intentional about cultivating relationships that aren't transactional, so that when you actually do need something, people say, oh yeah, are running over themselves to help.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that our experience, and Michael and I were talking about this earlier, is, part of raising money as a person of color. I mean, I first joked that suddenly everybody's like, wow, if you're a Black or brown or woman-led, firm, fund, company, suddenly everybody's lining up at the door, wanting to give you money, and it's not the case, right? Now, I do know that maybe a year ago, I'd call folks and I'd say, yeah, it's Martin Muoto of SoLa Impact. There's an assistant would go, it's Martin Muoto of SoLa Impact. And I go, who? And then they would go, well, put him out 3 or 4 months. Maybe he'll, get tired and stop calling. They go, no, it's Black Martin Muoto. Oh, geez, Black Martin Muoto. Let me take that call right now. So look, we are in a moment where there is, I say it tongue in cheek, but there's a heightened awareness that historically we've not had the access to capital. We've not had the access to the power structure. And so it's very important that young entrepreneurs realize that we are at that moment. Companies are still figuring their way through this. Institutional investors are still early in this journey and are still trying to figure out how to invest behind ESG and social impact and diversity and inclusion. And the point that I think you alluded to is, look, it's a relationship, it's a long journey. It's not going to be overnight. Despite what happened last year, despite where the country is, you're going to hear no a lot of times, but you have to allow the organizations to show up. You've got to go in with a glass half full mindset. You've got to believe in the best of people, and yet you will still hear no, right? And you know, so it's important not to be disheartened about that. I joke that being in the capital raising business is kind of like being in Hollywood. You audition all the time. I've never been an actor, never wanted to be, but I hear, you know, you're constantly being like, yeah, no, you didn't get the call back. So it is important to keep that mindset. And it really, I think as people of color, you're going to have a higher standard. I've always said, look, you know what? If we have to work twice as hard, it shouldn't be, but you have to be prepared to come in with that mindset. And you have to be prepared to come in with an incredible amount of positivity to say, look, you know, this is a chance for you to start to address some of the broader issues. And we have a credible product, a service, a technology, a vehicle to do that. And you have to come correct.
Absolutely. To that point, one of the things I'm excited that we're working on is this tech center. So all you entrepreneurs out there, we are working on building a state-of-the-art tech center. I was still like, why don't you talk about it? I just get really excited thinking about the opportunity that's present at the Beehive.
You know, the Beehive to us represented a step forward, which was a big investment in a opportunity zone business campus in the heart of South Central, you know, in the Goodyear track. We got a lot of support from, you know, the council member, Curran Price, who's just been really forward thinking about economic development. We really focused on creating an ecosystem that allows Black and brown led companies, women led companies, next to, you know, tech companies, next to non-women and Black and brown led companies. It really needs to be this ecosystem that combines talent and opportunity. You know, we've invested significantly in the Beehive, and as you pointed to, one of the things that we did in the Black Impact Fund is that we committed 13% of our asset fees and our profits to the Black Impact Community Fund, which Michael Tubbs has been giving us the direction in as the executive director, and really pushing our thinking as to how we deliver on the full value there. But one of the key pillars is access to education, and particularly education in and through technology. And so, you know, what we're calling the SoLa Tech and Entrepreneurship Center, until we have a corporate sponsor that replaces the SoLa with their name. But until then, the idea is to use esports as the chocolate on the broccoli, right, so to speak, to bring young people into a physical space where they can learn and play games, and learn about video development and animation, virtual reality and coding, but also all of the soft skills of project management, of building the resume, of accounting and finance and marketing. And so we are hoping to launch it at the end of this year, but it really encapsulates an important part of how we think opportunity is created in communities that have historically been disenfranchised.
No, and absolutely. And I just want to underscore that by the end of this year, there will be a place for you all in South LA, plug in South LA at the Beehive, to really grow your companies, receive mentorship, kind of help influence the culture of the Beehive. So I'm very excited about that. Now, I know we're running up against time. So given your wisdom, any last sort of words of advice, like what would you tell yourself what would you tell yourself 10 years ago when you were starting your first fund? What piece of advice would you tell yourself or words of inspiration?
I would leave with two broad thoughts. First of all is be bold. You've got to be bold and courageous, step out. Every type of entrepreneurship requires some level of risk, and therefore you don't know what will happen. You've got to jump off of the cliff without really knowing what's on the other side. And I think that this is a really important moment where we think that Black and brown entrepreneurs and women-led businesses should be very bold in their thinking. At the same time, I would say really be patient in how you build your track record. It takes your 10,000 hours, be prepared to put it in. There are no shortcuts. And so I think balancing those sometimes is challenging, especially for young people. But I come across amazing minds in media, in entertainment, in technology. I think Los Angeles has a unique place where it's not just hardcore technology and from the Bay Area. It's this convergence of content and media and entertainment that we have a corner on the market on. And a lot of that content and entertainment and media has come from urban communities. And so it's really important that it gets reflected and gets rewarded in communities like South LA. And I think what Derek Smith and Urban Tech Connect folks are doing in facilitating that is incredible. So we're, both Michael and I are very pleased to be part of this discussion and honored to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, well, again, thank you all for having us. We're so proud of the work of Plug in South LA and Tech Connect and looking forward to the impact you all will make. And I agree with Martin. It's just a time to be bold. There's no guarantee you'll be successful the first time, but there is a guarantee if you keep trying, you keep grinding, you keep getting better, that success and sort of the result you're looking for will find you. So again, thank you all. Great conversation. Hope to talk to you all soon.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.